Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
We are back here with Margy Bartley. Excited to have her here. She's a National Board Certified Health and Wellness Specialist, coach certified, and so many other things as a personal trainer, amongst many others. Lady with many titles, and she's really very knowledgeable. Please introduce yourself to everyone.
You bet. I'm Margy Bartley, National Board Certified Health and Wellness Coach, certified international health coach, certified group fitness instructor and personal trainer, and food psychology coach and behavior change specialist and diabetes prevention coach, and a few more.
Wow, a lot on your plate. What is your website?
It's Almonds and Oranges Health on Instagram, where you can find me and always DM me there. You can also find me on InWell, which is INWELL.com. And that is a health coaching platform, but you can certainly find me on there as well.
Awesome. And what did you want to discuss for today?
Well, today I've been thinking about functional aging. And what does that mean? Because that is a real question for a lot of people when they're trying to embrace changes with health and wellness, is what does that mean for them long term? And it can be challenging sometimes to grasp the long-term implications of change when we get very caught up in the short term, because our life is happening right now and we're real busy and we have stresses and things are going on. It can really feel difficult to embrace the change and keep in mind the long-term implication for that. Even though we know we have a part of our brain that always tells us and knows, yes, I need to do this, I'll be healthier down the road. But we do tend to think, oh, down the road is down the road. It's a lot further away, and I'm struggling right now. So I'll start the diet, I'll start the exercise, I'll do all that tomorrow or the next day or next week when things calm down. And before you know it, quite a few years have passed and our health is worsening, and our doctors are telling us you need to make change or you're going to experience really some very difficult health complications.
Reminds me, I got to use my chair. That's why I had to get this chair, because the herniated disc, and I sit there and I don't even use it. Go ahead.
Right. Yeah. Well, and there are factors that play into our health and wellness long term. There's primary aging and secondary aging, which breaking those down, primary aging is the breakdown of cells over time as we age. That's, every human being is genetically encoded to experience the aging process. So that is something we can't change. Secondary aging is the choices that we make along the road or along the way, and that we might end up with, things that if we smoke, if we drink, if we've made poor nutrition choices, if we haven't exercised, if we've allowed stress to become too much of a burden in our lives, those things create secondary aging, which also opens the door for disease. So disease, disability, etc. So those are two functions to look at. While we can't control primary aging, we can't control genetics, we can control what affects that secondary aging process, all of those lifestyle choices along the way. And that's what's really important to know, is that there is a large portion of our aging process that we can control. That doesn't mean it's easy always, because sometimes, again, we're in the moment, I'm stressed, I don't want to cook, I can't do those things, I go through the drive-through, I eat out of my car a lot, or I eat in front of the TV. All of those things can be really hard, so I'm not saying they're not, but those are the choices that we can control.
I want to hear more. Give me some examples of this.
Yeah. Well,
drink water. That's my advice.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that. That is one of the things that yeah. Well, I try and be helpful to people, but I know I do lecture a little bit on the importance of water. You're very right. Water is really key to drinking to help. It helps so many bodily processes that we don't realize. It helps our skin so we can actually look younger, because it pumps up the cells in your body and makes you look a little bit younger. Water literally lubricates joints and muscles, so we won't have so much joint pain or muscle fatigue if we are really well hydrated. We also, it supports your immune system. And, I'm just going to step to one side for just a moment and say, there was a couple of weeks ago when Martha Stewart came out on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and there was a little bit of backlash when she said, well, she just eats a clean life and does these things. And people were saying, well, sure, because she's kind of lived a privileged life, and sure, she can look great at 81 because she, hasn't had the struggles that other people have. She hasn't juggled a lot of jobs. She hasn't done this or that, or she's got a lot of money to afford better nutrition. But I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say there are a lot of things that we can all do that don't cost a lot of money, and you don't have to be Martha Stewart. And I'm also going to point out that Martha Stewart, while definitely has more money, and maybe, it's not really for us to say that her life has been easier and less struggle-free. She did spend time in prison, so let's just kind of keynote that.
Yeah.
Like she hasn't had struggles or hasn't had stressors. But everyone can afford water. We can afford water. It's better for you and cheaper than buying liters of soda. Liters of soda are not going to do you any good. Honestly, no good at all. So drink water. And there are a lot of healthful foods you can find in a store that don't cost much money. They're inexpensive. And you can even visit a dollar store, because dollar stores carry groceries and carry very cheap food. You can get tins of tuna, which is healthy for you. You can get bags of frozen vegetables for $1. You can get all kinds of things for $1 in the dollar store that'll really help support you. You can even buy vitamins in the dollar store if that's what you need. And there was an article that was in the news. Oh, it was a while back. I'm going to say maybe 10 years ago. There was a gentleman who didn't have a lot of money, was a working class person, but he was very overweight, and diabetes ran in his family, and he was really struggling with being pre-diabetic, and decided he needed to make change. And of course, one of his concepts was that he didn't know how he was going to afford healthful food. But he did shop at the dollar store for other items, and when he realized there was the food choices there too, so he started buying a lot of his groceries there at the dollar store, and lost over 100 pounds just by making that kind of conscious choice with food that he could afford, that was healthful for him.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to know that health is in everybody's reach. Sometimes we just need to know what our resources are and where to find them. And find support. Find someone like me, like a health coach, that can help you locate resources and also understand how and why all of those things can fit into an overall healthy plan that's successful to anyone. So I think the key there too is if we want to successfully age, we need to start making healthful choices, but we also need to learn what the healthful choices are and where to find them. And that is really, I think, a key point for people to understand too, what successful aging is. And successful aging means that you go through the aging process. By the time you're, quote unquote, a senior, middle-aged, or becoming a senior, that you have a reduced risk for diseases, right? You haven't developed cancer, you don't have diabetes, you all of those comorbidities that go together that we see more frequently as we age. You successfully age if you have kept those at bay and kept them at a lower level of risk for yourself. And that is really important to know, that that's also something that we can all do. We can all actually successfully age by making some of those healthful choices. And I know I've been mentioning quite a bit of nutrition, like nutrition choices and how that fits in there. But exercise is also a key component to successfully aging. And that also factors into what's called active aging. Active aging is also has a wider umbrella of the 7 pillars of health, which includes emotional and mental wellness. Give me a minute. I gotta think of it.
It's okay.
I know. Reduced disease-related risks. You also have a high level of physical ability. You are connected emotionally and spiritually. You have a good social system and network, and you have an overall feeling of well-being for yourself. So that's really key with active aging as well, that you're hanging in there. You've got all of those different areas of your life that are still coming together, or you can still be working on those as you age as well. It's not necessarily that we hit a certain age where we say, oh, I don't have to work on my social well-being anymore, or my emotional well-being. But active aging, you work consistently on all of those pillars. Functional aging is a different type of thing that focuses primarily on the ability, physical ability to continue to maintain and do things. allowing you to live your life the way you want to, being able to do the things that you want to do. And that is really key. That's what I see. I see a lot of seniors that I work with that are both successfully aging because they are active agers and they are functionally aging well. They work out. I personally train a number of people that are over the age of 70. I teach several fitness classes that primary age range is 72 to 68, but I do have a few people a little bit longer, or I'm sorry, a little bit younger than that. I have a few people that are a little bit older. So I have a couple of people in their 80s that come to class quite frequently. So it's, again, very important, especially if you want to maintain independence, to make sure that you maintain your physical well-being. And there's been more and more research that has come out that has determined that being active actually is more effective at reducing your risk for dementia and Alzheimer's than nutrition or like brain games. So for many years we thought that, oh, I've got to keep my mind active, I don't want to get dementia. So we do Sudokus, we read, we write, we do things like that. That's not that those are bad. Those are still very good for you and for your brain health. But they have found that physical activity and frequent physical activity affects your brain health more than the reading the Sudokus.
Yes.
How to say that? Yeah.
I never even played that, but I know of it. Yes.
To be honest, but I do read a lot. Yeah. So that, it's really important. I think too often we put, in general, physical activity a little bit lower on the priority list than we do nutrition. Just my experience, it's been, I feel like people think, well, I have to eat every day, right? We have to eat. Yeah. So that's why people want to bump up the nutrition and look at diets a lot more frequently than they are willing to look at physical activity. And also because we tend to see physical activity as taking more time out of our day. And that's the real struggle there is I don't have time. I don't have time. I don't have time. Well,
Yeah.
if you don't have time to exercise now, sooner or later, you're going to have time to deal with disease. So that really becomes more important as we age, especially if you want to maintain independence, that's where it's really important.
And perfect time segue to take a break.
All right.
Just tell us how we can reach you, Margy.
Oh, okay. You can reach me on Instagram at Almonds and Oranges Health. And then you can also reach me at INWELL.com on the health coaching platform.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Continue. There's our break. Just got to remind everyone they can tune in half the way, say, who's this woman talking to Jill? Who's this Jill girl talking to Margy? Yeah. So
That's right. That's right. All right. Well, now we can segue into not just successful aging, but what impacts that successful aging. So if we want to be a successful ager, we have to look a little bit into our past because it's whole path of the aging process that becomes affected. There is something called the life course theory and its impact on aging. And what that says is the things that have happened to us in our past do affect our health into the future, which of course makes sense. There are some things though that we can't control. So children can't control how they're fed or what their environment is, and those things can really impact us. If you have parents that smoke, if you were born with a low birth weight, things like that, and you can't control that, and it can give you lasting impact. I have worked with two people in the past who never smoked a cigarette in their life, but grew up in homes where parents smoked. And one of them developed lung cancer and the other one had COPD. And that was simply for all their entire childhoods living in a house with a lot of cigarette smoke. So it's important to know that what that secondhand smoke does to our children and does to people around us, which is why there are so many laws now. You can't smoke in public places because nobody wants to be exposed to that. And just think of that in terms of your children. Also think in terms of how are you being. We talked about this a little bit last week because we talked about body image as well and how the foods they're fed and what kind of eating patterns we have affects the way we see ourselves. And this is true again in that what we feed our children does impact their health for the future. There is an obesity epidemic in the US, and children are much more obese than they used to be. And it's not just a little bit overweight. They do, it is in the category of obesity. And that's because so many children are fed very fast food, processed food type diets. I've even talked with a few adults who said in their childhoods, they were never fed vegetables. They never had fresh produce. They never had any of that. So they weren't even sure what a vegetable tasted like. So we want to think in terms of that too. Now, I know I'm not trying to shame parents or judge them. We do the best we can with what we've got at the time. Again, let's go back to learning, reaching out and learning and finding out what our resources are and how we can make change. There are a lot of professionals available to help you. And it doesn't always have to cost a lot. It doesn't have to cost a lot to work with a professional, nor does it have to cost a lot to shop well and to do well. And to have, here's another thing that impacts a lot of youth is the access to areas that they can exercise in. Where are safe places? So if you've got inner city kids that their parents don't feel that they have safe parks or safe areas where they can go, then there's a concern there. And let's also circle back around to schools. Schools don't really always have gym classes, PE classes, weekly for students, and they don't always have a lot of healthful choices in the cafeteria. And even if they did, children aren't really educated to make a better health choice. And children don't grasp that concept. So it's really not beneficial necessarily, and I'm going to hedge that a little bit, to try and teach children to make healthier choices when you keep giving them choices that include junk food, right? Because I mean, I grew up in a pretty healthy household, and yet if I was in the cafeteria and they had chocolate pudding, I'm going to choose that over, the plate of broccoli. So children just don't have that concept. They don't have that global concept of what it means to have a healthier choice. And then it's very hard for children too. If they're you're expecting them to make the choice in the cafeteria, but then they go home and what they're fed at home is not healthy. So again, it just really offsets, and it's a difficult thing. So I think it's more important to work with parents, and not just because we want to educate parents, because we want to help them. We want to help them understand why it's important down the road. So I also just want to mention too that there have been some studies that have found that the population now in their 20s and 30s potentially has a lower life expectancy than their parents did. And so for the first time in history, we're seeing people coming up who aren't expected to live as long as their predecessors. And there's also been, I don't want to say outbreak, I don't want to say epidemic, let me just say an increase, there we go, an increase in colon cancer amongst people in their late 20s up and through their mid to early 30s. And that didn't used to be the case. The standard for colonoscopies is in your 50s. For a while it was 50, it might be 50 now, but they are kind of puzzled. Like, why are we seeing so many of these young people with colon cancer now? This is not something that used to happen. This is also something that we see in schools now. There are a lot of children who are dealing with diabetes, need to be, and I'm not talking type 1, which is an autoimmune disorder, talking type 2, which is lifestyle, right? And we're seeing a lot of children with type 2 diabetes in schools now, where their school nurses have to help the children test their blood sugars and be on medications for that, right? And there are very severe long-term health implications for having diabetes. And type 2 diabetes is reversible, and it is manageable through lifestyle. So let's just, make that clear too. But again, we make these choices as adults. I think we need to understand what we're doing when we impact our children with those choices. We're not setting them up for a successful aging, for functional aging. And we need to take a look for ourselves as well. Like, what do I want for my child, and what am I willing to do to turn their life story theory around a little bit? So when we are now, maybe we're in our 30s, maybe 40s or 50s, and you're looking at your aging process, and usually as soon as you hit those late 20s or hit the 30s, when people start to kind of feel like, yeah, I know I'm getting older. And you think, well, what can I do now? We have a whole lifetime of patterns. So that's where I tend to see people in their late 20s, early 30s with that. Well, but I was raised this way, but I don't want to be this way. I know it's not good for me. My doctor's telling me I have to change this. I'm pre-diabetic, or I'm on this medication, or whatever it is. But they didn't ever have the tools or the role model for that.
Mhm.
I think it's really important to understand that can be also reversed. So while that early history for us is really impactful in our aging process, we can turn that around. We can learn to start making healthful choices. And I also want to stress, this is not about willpower. This willpower is not involved. Willpower doesn't take you very far at all. It's all about learning the skills and the tools and finding the motivation, the intrinsic motivation to want to make the changes. And sometimes I've worked with people who said, I feel so much better now. I did not know that this is what being healthy felt like, right? Because they've never really felt healthy in their whole life. And now when they've stopped drinking soda and junk food and processed food, they're realizing they actually have energy. They are sleeping better. Their skin clears up. They have reduced, sometimes skin rashes and things like that, because they didn't know that they had maybe some allergic reactions to some of these foods and chemicals that they were consuming. So it's really important to know that we can start to feel better. And sometimes that alone can help build the motivation. Once you start to feel better, realize how that feels. I once had a woman who was up to 2 to 3 liters of soda a day, and she cut back on the soda. It was just a gradual process, didn't have to go cold turkey. But by the time she got to a point where she really wasn't consuming any soda anymore, she told me she couldn't believe how much better she felt not having that in her system all the time. And there was a special event coming up, and she said, at the special event, I really miss my I don't know, it was Coke, or I don't want to name a soda, Dr. Pepper, Coke, Pepsi, whatever they all are. She really wanted a soda. We went to her event, she had her soda, and she came back and she said, oh my goodness, I did not feel good after having just that one soda. Did not feel it. And it really made her decide that she was done with soda for good. She said, all those years, that's how I was feeling. And I didn't even realize it was all because of some of these choices. So yeah, we have to allow ourselves some time to grow and to feel better with those.
Wow. Oh, my mother loves soda, and she got my kids, they're 6 and 8, into it. And before she passed, I mean, the kid was 2, the other one was 2 months, but so now they think soda's amazing, like, and they want it on the weekends. So I say, okay, you can have it on the weekends. But then I'm like, I don't even drink soda. I don't even like it. Yeah. But then I look at the apple juice and I said, wait a second, it's the same type of sugar and more sugar, some of it. So what's really the difference? The regular apple juice we send in their lunch packs for Mott's or whatever it is, it still has the sugar in it.
Right. Well, it has sugar, and keep in mind too that sodas also have a lot of chemicals. Apple juice doesn't typically have a lot of chemicals, and then soda also has the carbonation. And for a child who's maybe having one soda as a treat on the weekend or something like that, the effects are. I'm not a researcher. I wouldn't think there'd be any really harmful long-term effects from that. But as an adult, if you're drinking 2 and 3 liters, not only that, but carbonation is a gas and it expands. That's why when we drink a soda, we burp, right? Because it's gas, it has to expand, it has to come out. But when there's a lot of that carbonation that doesn't come out when we burp, it's a gas that's still in your body, but it expands. And it has to be released. So it also causes bloating, and you'll have a lot of bloating from that. And then it also releases through your skin. It'll evaporate through your skin and you get some dry skin. So that's another thing. People drink a lot of soda, once they come off the soda, start to notice that their skin improves, right?
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I know, right? And you're right, but you're right about the juice. There's a lot of added sugars in juices, and some ways to get around that. There are some brands that have natural additives to it, or natural other juices in it, without adding a lot of the processed sugars to it. But granted, those juices are a little more expensive than the other types. So there we go back around to sometimes healthy food can be a little more expensive. The other thing to keep in mind too is you can always have some of that soda or have some juice, maybe water it down half and half. Yeah.
All right. Well, we are out of time, Margy. Would you mind sharing how we could reach you?
Yeah. Contact me on Instagram. You can DM me, and my page is Almonds and Oranges Health. And then you can also reach me on Inwell, IINWELL.com. And that is a health coaching platform, and I am there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more. Thank you again for being here, Margy. We appreciate your time. Thanks.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.